Tyler, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, my first question for you, after you already had an exit as a founder, why start another company at all?
Yeah, I asked myself that same question. And I think what I came to is, I think as a capitalist at the end of the day, right, I believe that the profit motive is a great way to find out if you're doing something that matters, right, and have impact, right. And so when I was looking for that next thing that I wanted to spend my time on, the I guess the hammer that I knew and felt comfortable with was a company. Um, and I considered, should it be a nonprofit? Should it be, something else? But I kept coming back to, it's really powerful when you ask somebody, how much will you spend to solve this problem? Um, and that gives you the confidence and conviction that you're doing something that matters.
Yeah. Um, so, I'm curious, there's a lot of places you could have focused on. How'd you pick emergency management?
Yeah. Well, the fun thing about starting a company is you don't know where you're going to end up. I could not have told you that it would have ended up here. I started more from, I think, wanting a few things on an important set of check boxes to be true. One was a problem that I thought was not going away. If anything, it would get bigger or at least stay, relevant for a long time. Two was a customer that I could see myself working hard for, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're, grinding and in the trenches or getting that late night phone call, you want to pick it up and know that you're working for someone that you respect.
You got to
Um,
really, really care about them. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, and so I started more from like a climate lens, right? And hey, like there's a new disaster on TV every day if you actually pay attention, whether it's impacting 20,000 people or 2 million people or more. So I started looking at what are we doing outside of all of the awesome technological breakthroughs around energy on weathering the storm, right? Because the science uh, says that the next 30 years or maybe next 50 years are going to get worse before they get better. Um, and fast forward, I kind of found this agency in government that's responsible for all of those disasters, whether it was forest fire, flood, drought, food insecurity, flooding. They all kind of flow into this one office. And then I came to learn that environmental disasters were one bucket of work. They also deal with what they call man-made disasters, which are active shooter or terrorism. And so all in, it checked. And then I met a few of these folks. I kind of said, "Oh, this seems interesting. Let's see what's here. How are they solving problems?" The first checkbox I mentioned was checked easily because I don't think those disasters are going away. It was the second one where I got really much more convicted because I met the folks, and I think there's a conception, I won't call it a misconception, but a conception that folks in government don't work that hard. And I went and met some of these emergency managers, and they're working overtime. They're in the office every weekend, late night, 24/7 call center. So I said, okay, these folks are, have too much in their portfolio already. It's growing. Maybe technology can help.
Totally. And I think I remember talking with you about that as you were forming the ideas. And and I'd love to have you unpack for us. There's, I think, as I've heard from you, there's kind of like before a disaster, during a disaster, after one, or an emergency, however you want to call it. And each of those areas is massive. You could maybe build an entire public company out of each of those parts. So like how did, one of the hard parts is always like figuring out where to focus. What drove your decisions around that?
Yeah, it changed honestly from the beginning to where we started to find traction. Because where I initially got
Always does,
excited,
right? Yeah.
yeah, that's going to be a theme. Where I started was, I would say more in the response category of like, hey, we have all these IoT devices, we have more ability, drones, you name it, cameras that build situational awareness. How do we bring all that into one place? But as I had more conversations, and it was really through that process that the answer I'm going to give came out of. I also wanted to have a product that, when we spoke to the market, it resonated across the board. And the fact of the matter is, there is a disaster happening, every day in a different place, but not every day, for each one of these offices. And so as I asked them, hey, what do you do? What they call a blue sky day versus a dark sky day, blue sky being when there is not something bad happening. What does that look like? And it's all about preparedness and resilience and mitigation. And so that was something that every office was doing, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like they spend most of their time on
that. Exactly.
As an individual office, right? Yeah.
Exactly. There may be years in between an activation of an emergency operations center. And so that was, kind of a very low risk place to say, if we save you time here, we will be doing that for every office across the country. And so that's where I really started asking discovery questions in that bucket around before. I can keep going.
Let's talk about that, because let me guess. You spent 12 months sitting in some dark basement, cooking up product ideas, building software without talking to anybody, right?
Luckily, I knew better this time around. When you and I started, doing this 15 years ago or whatever it was, I think we did some of that, and we learned through pain that it wasn't the best process. So no,
literally never do that.
Yeah. yeah. If any new entrepreneurs are listening, please don't do that unless you want pain. No, it was very much getting out and talking to people and asking questions, right? Like, and they sounded like dumb questions. Yeah. What do you actually do? Like, how do you spend your day? What's hard? What's easy? What do you like? What do you not like? What systems are you using? Are they good? And doing that over and over and over.
Over and over and over again. Yeah, it's funny. I remember, as Brandon and I were starting Pursuit, you and Gunnar had been starting EM1, and there was a phenomenal quote that you had one day that I'll never forget, which is basically, if you walk out of a customer discovery meeting and you're disappointed, then it wasn't a discovery meeting, it was a sales meeting. And I think that mindset of trying to be more scientific about it is such an important thing for early stage founders. But I think in public sector, one of the hard parts is where do you even start? Who are these emergency managers? Who has an emergency manager? So let's shift into how you did that tactically, and I'd love for you to just walk through the infrastructure you set up, even before you had your first customer, before you had a product. I know the answer, but what was the first thing that you bought? What was the first tool you bought?
Yeah, it was Pursuit. And not just because I knew a guy, but because I knew in order to scale conversation, the most important thing I think to scale or accelerate to start a company or when you're building a company is learning, right? If you can increase velocity on learning, at the end of the day, you will surpass whoever else you're up against. At least that's my belief. And so to scale that, it's conversations, right? And so I really, I would say, I was coming in as unconnected, whatever you want to say. I knew nobody, literally no one. This was a category that I knew, I knew what FEMA was. I did not know there was a patchwork of thousands of these offices across the country. And so I went at it two different directions, which ended up, I would recommend this to somebody else is getting started, which is cold outreach, pure, I don't want to say boiler room, but you get the idea, right? You got to get on the phone, call people you don't know, and see if they'll engage with you. If they have a problem to solve, if they are motivated to solve it, And I did that through Pursuit, and obviously I knew you, but my view was I also knew back from our days at Wisely, like being data driven and how you go do those cold calls and having a system that you can kind of fine grain target who you're going to talk to makes you more efficient. And so I adopted that from the start.
Yeah.
The
By the
others,
way, on that point, there's a
yeah,
great quote from Dharmesh Shah, the founder of the CTO of HubSpot, and he talks all day about how if you just define the problem better, right? Like that, he in his mind, like the reason why HubSpot is so successful is they define the problem better than everybody else, right? And I think what you're talking about is like, if you know who the market is and you call them and you literally get them on the phone just to understand what they're doing every day, to your point about learning, it's an unfair advantage.
yeah. I mean, my cold call script was not. It was, hey, I'm Tyler. I'm an entrepreneur who's interested in building some technology in this category. I have a few questions if you can give me 5 minutes today. But that was how it started, right? And people said, sure, shoot, Tyler, what can I do to help you out, right?
You're trying to help me? Cool.
Yeah, I was shocked coming from calling restaurants, right? Because first thing they do is say sorry no and hang up on you, right? So these folks who are willing to talk, which also, like, I would say my conviction through these steps grew because of the behavior that I felt from the market, which was like they wanted help, and so on the other side, and just to cover back to like the two different things I did also try and go with introductions where I could get them, right? Like a warm intro does open a door, and I was trying to open those, and so it was kind of the 1-2 punch of warm intros plus cold outreach that I'd say both of those have borne fruit as we've gotten the company stood up.
Yeah, totally. In my mind, warm intros are great. Once you've homed in on a problem and a solution and you're trying to take it to market, sure, like use every one you can get, but you don't want to get a false positive, and you also don't want to waste time. So that's, to your point, that's where the cold conversations come in. So you bought Pursuit. That was your first tech stack purchase. What else did you do in the early days, just from a tech stack point of view?
It was really just Pursuit, and I adopted HubSpot. Funny you mentioned Dharmesh. And it's nice that they work together, right? So the integration there made it incredibly easy. Like, and I had built out some of those stuff back at Wisely of cold outbound email sequences, right? That had 1, 3 days later, email 2, 2 days later, email 3. If you reply, you get knocked out. And so I had, I turned that script that I mentioned around, hey, I'm an entrepreneur interested in chatting about problems, into a sequence that, and then reason why HubSpot was important, one, it automates those emails for you, and you just feed, new contacts from Pursuit, drop into the sequence. And then what I would do is I'd keep an eye every day on who was opening or clicking on those emails, and then they'd get a phone call. So I wasn't, completely taking the shotgun approach to the calls. It was kind of like, hey, if you engage with my content, I'm gonna give you a call.
Yeah, totally. I think that is one of the smartest ways to figure out who's in the market. And we're not going to talk about radar in this one right now, but being able to pull in marketing campaign data so that you can actually see who's engaging with your emails, that's a great way to figure out who to focus on. So if you can, take us through some of the metrics, right? So like how many emails you sending? And I don't know the way you think about this, but in my mind, like how many emails you sending, how many calls, what are the conversion rates into, getting meetings booked, and then, into customers, and, I guess opportunities and then customers. Like, how do you think about that funnel and what's worked?
Yeah. I would say, the lore in startup land is if you find one channel that works, that's all you need to, continue.
Most companies find 0. Yeah.
Find zero, right? Yeah. And so I'll go through the metrics, but what I would say is, as I was kind of preparing for this and just pulling the data together, we have more than one, right? Like warm intros have gotten us, let's call it a third of our meetings. Cold email has gotten us about a third of our meetings, and cold calls have gotten us about a third of our meetings. You could sprinkle in, like, we've done some LinkedIn automation where we do outbound through, friending folks on LinkedIn, sending messages. That's been a much smaller amount, although we just started. Email, so there's like, maybe we're 6 months into this, a little bit longer now. We've sent, I just took a look, like close to 7,500 emails, right? And that's not that many people because we might send them 5 emails. But half of those that get opened, 10% get clicked, 10% get replied to. And I think we've gotten maybe like closer to 1% meeting rate just from email, right? And that has like a, hey, book my calendar here type of call to action. And those calls blow that out of the water when it comes to effectiveness. We've done a few hundred
also
calls.
Harder for you to be on the phone all day doing it, right? You can send more emails than calls, but go on.
Yeah, exactly. I can press a button and the emails go, and it's hundreds or a day. Calls, we've done a few hundred, and we track whether we leave a voicemail, we connect with somebody, leave a live voicemail, no answer, whatever. And the connection rate, which again is like, hey, we had a conversation of a minute or two, or sometimes it's 20 minutes, is 30%. So we're connecting, and then of those 30% that pick up the phone and talk with me, 20% of those book a meeting. So
that's huge, right? It works. I mean, cold calling works. That's why there are BDR teams, and that's why AEs have to be on the phones. It works. It's hard work.
Yeah, and yeah, one thing I'll add that I thought was interesting as I looked at this stuff, preparing for this. Email has gotten more effective over time, and my explanation for that is we had more to talk about. At the beginning we didn't have a product. There was not much to click on. Now the emails have short videos that I narrate a demo, and some success metrics we can include based on early customers. So cold calling, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but like, a voice and interesting questions is more compelling than an email with, can I use some of your time, with maybe no payoff. So that's been interesting to see email get more effective over time.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Well, let's take a step back and look like future for EM1. What are the next 12, 24 months look like, in your mind's eye, or even if you want to answer on a longer time horizon than that?
Yeah. For me, what I'd say to folks is, like, the name of the company is EM1 because we thought there's an opportunity for an all-in-one emergency management solution. So that's what EM1 is, right? All-in-one emergency management. And that's like the 10-year vision, right? Because before, there's preparedness and resilience mitigation, right? Trying to make the impact of disaster as low as, as minimal as you can. But once you're in response, there's incident management, there's alerting and mass notification. Once you're in a recovery, there's all the tracking around reimbursement. So, but all those tools are disconnected today, right? So where you're getting your situational awareness is not helping you create your incident action plan, or SITREP automatically. So I think there's reason, not just from a convenience standpoint, but from like the data being in one place makes everything more powerful standpoint, to have an all-in-one solution. So we're kind of, that's the path. In terms of the next year, I think the good news is the market is pulling more solutions out of us on this preparedness side. And so we're just listening and chopping down the next biggest problem folks bring our way.
Totally. I love that story. So, closing, I guess, on the topic of GovTech, one of the things that I've heard, I'm curious your perspective on this, is like a great growth rate for a GovTech company might be 50, 60% year over year, right? That would be phenomenal. 70% would be like out of this world. But for most investors in venture, like that doesn't even register on their radar, right? 70% growth is not amazing when you're compared to like, you know, Cursor or Wiz or OpenAI or all those companies. So that makes it traditionally, I mean, there are GovTech VCs, but it kind of makes it tougher to raise from VCs. And then on the other hand, once you do get to a place where you've got, you know, you have some revenue under you, 5 million, 10 million, maybe even less. Private equity folks love that because they look at the retention and it's super high gross retention. So you maybe 98, 99% gross retention. You know, and so those PE investors are really happy with a 50% growth rate with super high retention and ability to cash flow. For you as a second-time founder, you know, obviously you know the pros and cons of raising money. How do you think about that? How do those dynamics affect how you think about like raising capital or growth for EM1?
Yeah, well, I think they're really important, right? Because if the way I think about it is the problem is what matters, right? And like you know, we went through the process of how I picked. Like I had the opportunity, privilege, whatever you want to call it, to sit up and think about what I wanted to spend time on. And so for me, everything is in service of reaching and like working on that problem. And so that's it. Yeah. And so to me, like any company should think about how to fund itself to maximize its chances of solving the problem, right? And in certain cases, if you're building rockets, that's going to mean one thing, right? And so, you know, just making that really specific, I'm trying to find out what our growth rate is going to look like. I don't know yet, and as a result, we haven't raised money. You know, my co-founder Gunnar and I are not paying ourselves, right? We're bootstrapping the business and trying to live off of the revenues we're creating, and grow the business like that until we really see, and we're starting to like clear signal that we should be pressing the gas.
And there's
So
opportunity cost to not.
Exactly. It's like, hey, you know, if we care about solving the problem, well, solving it for more people faster matters. And it also, back to velocity of learning, feeds the company with, you know, information that we can get better faster. So I think the key thing though there is also like we saw through the arc of, you know, up to 2021 and the valuations that happened and then what came after that. The way you fund your company is as important in its survival as product market fit. It impacts founder motivation, employee motivation, right?
Founder decision making, you know, I think a lot of people are like more money's better, and we don't think it is necessarily.
Yeah. In fact,
good critical thinking is what matters.
Yeah, it blows a lot of companies up. So punchline, I would say is, you know, I don't think we're at a point right now where GovTech is like getting these mega rounds and $100 million rounds and things like that, because there is some constraint around like you can't get around the fact that procurement takes longer and the budget process is once a year, and if it's not in the budget, it's got to go into discretionary funds, you know, or even pay as you go. Like all these things are not yet kind of part of the normal way of operating in government. I think that's going to change, and I do think, you know, as folks that are tech native or AI native, whatever, like get into those jobs, the expectations and the needs will start to adjust, and so that's a tailwind that I'm excited about.
So I guess, Ty, there's a lot of people out there that are starting out. I actually talked to a founder yesterday who's in a similar spot to you, maybe a little earlier. And then there are other companies who are outside of government or public sector who are wanting to break in. And, I think it might be interesting for those people, new founders or companies trying to break into the market, to talk to you and hear your experience. Are you cool broadcasting your contact deets to the world and having people reach out? What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Tyler at EM1.com is my email. So hit me up there.
Cool.
I'm all about paying it forward. I think some of the things that I've taken advantage of building this company came from GovTech founders that have done it before, giving me a few secrets along the way. At the end of the day, my view is like, it is harder right now to build a GovTech company than a private sector company, but someone's got to do it. Right.
Totally.
And we need those people to come help our country stronger, better. Right. And so everybody come on in. We need more. If I can help, hit me up.
Cool. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
For sure.